Hello, my name is MelanyHA2024, and today we'll be doing a look into the social action theory. Today's prompt will include explaining Weber's concept of power and authority. Secondly, what are the different types of authority, giving real world examples of each. And lastly, what is the relevance of these concepts to that of law? But first, we have to talk about the man himself, Max Weber. Max Weber was a German sociologist and a political economist. He is often accredited with being one of the founders of the modern day study of sociology and administration. In many of his works, you can see that he focuses on economics, philosophy, and sociology, therefore giving him the title as both an economist and a social scientist. His principles of value and neutrality have become the aforementioned foundation of the methodology of social sciences, which often have a highlight in economics. Now, going into Weber's life as a history student back in the late 1950s, you can see that there was an all around engagement with his work to now the present day due to his rationality and bureaucracy, who have led into looking at his analysis of stock trading, which also reflect a lot of knowledge that he had on both the legal science and economic principles. The concepts of power. The concept of power can be defined as the production of intended effects, or at least the attempt to do so. What this likely means is having the ability to generate the effects an individual would like or wish to based on their means. This can be having a lot of influence or a lot of money or other things that can give you more power than, let's say, the average individual. Going back into Weber's definition, however, it can be stated that power is the ability to exercise one's will over others. Power affects more than personal relationships. It shapes larger dynamics like social groups, professional organizations, and governments. In the social groups, it could say be a leader amongst the little group, who people are more likely to follow or do what they say because they are considered to be the leader. In professional organizations, we could say the office life, having the CEO have more power than, let's say, the likely desk job worker. And in the government, you could say the president has more power over the Secretary of State. Now, we can also see how it relates to the social structure, such as the rich versus the poor. The rich are more likely to have more power than, let's say, unfortunately, a homeless individual on the sides of the streets. Though this can also look back into medias, such as celebrities having more influence or more power to say or do things versus someone who is not known or unlikely forgotten due to time. Going into the concept of authority, however, Weber describes authority as legitimate authority. It is power whose use is considered just and appropriate by those over whom the power is being exercised on. Explaining this, we look at it's the ability to exercise an individual's will onto others because it is being backed up with a lot of the time valid reasoning. For example, it could be long established rules. It could also be long standing laws, or even just because their character reflects something that you would want to follow. Weber also emphasizes these threes in his essay called The Three Types of Legitimate Rule, in which he discusses that there are three legitimate rule ways for authority. The different types of authority. Authority is a modality of power, and the ideal types of authority are based on different motives for compliance. This means that there's a lot of reasons why someone might have more authority than others, and a lot of motives as to why somebody would be more inclined to comply, despite it not being understood or even likely followed by others. As mentioned before, the three types of legitimate authority are legal rational authority, which involves rules, laws, and concrete procedures. This could maybe be judges or police officers exercising their authority over others as they have credentials to do so. Traditional authority, however, is more so based on what is already established and customs and just the traditional sense of maybe even family life. For example, the parents having more authority over their kids, or grandparents having authority over the children, aunts and uncles, just very figure-headed ways of having authority based on traditional customs of the family life. Charismatic authority is very different because it is more so about character and even personality traits. It can incline more individuals to follow what they're saying or give them more authority or power because they are just more charismatic. Their personality or character reflects something that you would see yourself following. Their ideals or what they tell you has more meaning or more power because of what they stand for, likely making you stand with them because of how they are responding to many various situations. Going into the examples of authority, we first take a dive into traditional authority. For example, a grandma. A grandma may have more authority in, let's say, a specific culture, for example, the Latin culture, because you are taught from an early age to respect and to honor your grandparents, even if they aren't your parents. They also have the same amount of authority to tell you not to do something as they have authority to give you permission, which may not be looked or even many times frowned upon by other cultures, though that is a great example of traditional authority. Going to the legal rational authority, however, we can see a police officer is a great example of this, as they are given and even trained into responding to legal situations, for example, with how to deal with a criminal. Let's say you are parked in an area where it says you're not allowed to be there. Well, they have the authority to hand you a ticket, and they also have the authority to cite you to go to court and respond for that ticket. Now, looking at charismatic authority, one of the greatest figures of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr., is praised with being one of the first or maybe one of the best examples of charismatic authority. He was able to induce civil rights movements and large marches without being violent. Therefore, a non-violent protest was done, even though if what he was receiving many times was a lot of hate. Therefore, a lot of people were more inclined to follow what he was saying as his means of acting for justice for the Black American community was to not engage in violence, if not to hold speeches, speak out on what their grievances were. And therefore, a lot of media coverage was done on his very passive protesting for Black American individuals to receive the same rights as their white folk in the United States. Now, what we will be discussing will be the concepts relevant to that of law. Authority to law. For example, police officers may have the right to enforce laws and even punish those who go against the law. For example, taking people to jail or forcing them to go to court because they have the authority to enforce this law upon others. They were trained in order to give people these tickets, these ordinances, ask them to step out of the car, or even have the opportunity to do a search and seizure on what they're holding in order to continue giving public safety, as well as looking at why a criminal may be doing something, or even doing a search and seizure, or having a warrant that states that they are allowed to enter the premises, even if it is your own home. Going into the power of law, there are some people that can get out of worse punishments due to their power. What I mean by this is that there are individuals who have a lot of money, who are more wealthy, who also have more time and influence than others, that give them the opportunity to not even spend a night in jail, which a lot of people don't really have the chance to do so because they don't have the means to be able to get out of jail. They don't have the time to spend long hours in the courtrooms or even be able to hire legal representation such as lawyers who are there to defend them in court, so they don't even have to appear. It could also be involved with having funds not to face jail time. If you have a large corporation or a lot of money, you will not be likely forced to go into all these places and receive jail time because you have the funds to have a lawyer who will likely represent you well rather than a public defender who might look at your case less than 7 minutes, which, as we have mentioned before, is not enough time to gather a proper case to defend an individual. Though influence can also be a bigger factor, as the jury may be likely to give them the right if they are seemingly more affluent or they're just more known rather than someone who doesn't have any power over anything. They don't really have major contributions to that of social life. Now, to summarize everything that we have discussed today, Max Weber was one of the founders of sociology. He had a large concentration of law, economics, and, as we mentioned before, the forms of authority. There are three types of authority, which are legal rational, who we stated can be police officers as one of the biggest examples, traditional, grandparents, aunts and uncles, or figureheads like chiefs, traditional areas, and charismatic, such as Martin Luther King Jr., who was one of the biggest civil rights activists of the time. Power can be defined as being able to will someone's intended effects, while authority is being able to mandate or have others follow them based on legitimate factors or reasoning. Law, in its practice, is cemented on society's views and followings of both power and authority. This means you are more likely to follow laws because there are people that have more power or they are given the authority to induce or enforce these rules upon you. With that all in mind, thank you for listening. Here are my references. Thank you.